Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes. And with me is my fellow anthropological philosopher, Mr. Ken Kelly.
Guten Tag, Rory, and I believe that is in keeping with the theme of what we might be looking at today. It's a great day as we come, I guess, if you're listening to this in real time and not on the catch-up podcasts, going into the festive season, I guess. And episode 62, we're going to be opening with that first contact. And, you know, there's the first contact when we maybe see a client in our counselling room, but this can extend beyond that to first contact. Maybe we speak to them on the phone to arrange that first session. And, of course, that links into a Facebook comment that we will be bringing to you. Going into theory with Rory today, and we're looking at I and thou, Rory. Is this where our German theme kind of fits in?
It does. We're going to be talking about the philosophy of Martin Buber, who is in fact an was an anthropological philosopher. Anthropological philosophy, the study of phenomenology, metaphysics, and all those things that are very difficult to measure with a ruler or a weighing machine.
I like it. So that we're going to be looking at that, the I and thou philosophy of dialogue. And then we're going to be closing today with something else that's a little difficult to measure with a ruler, and that is our own prejudice and how we can challenge our own prejudice that we may take with us into a counselling relationship. And of course, again, informed from Facebook, and we'll get to that at the end. But let's kick off with that opening and that first contact. And this comes from our Facebook group. Now, just to kind of give you the picture of this, we have a massive, huge, heaving Facebook group which is full of students of counselling and psychotherapy from all over the world. We've even got some tutors in there, and we've got some qualified therapists who hang around because the content is so good. If you're not a part of our community, join us, because this is where these questions come from, and you can do that by just going onto Facebook, putting in Counselling Tutor, knock on the door, we'll open it for you, and we will welcome you in, and you can come and join over 15,000 like-minded people from around the world. So what did we have this week, Rory?
Well, we thank Samantha Collins, one of the posters in the Facebook page, and she says, "Okay, please calm my nerves. What do you say on the very first contact with a new client by phone? Brackets, the first ever! Exclamation mark."
Yeah.
Plug. I don't know if you can remember this, Ken, but I can remember my very first contact with clients. I could barely push the button. I was so nervous on the push button phone that I had. And what I would say to that is that the client is expecting your phone call. If they've been to an agency and they've been assessed, and then the person who's doing the assessing says someone will be in contact with you, they are expecting a phone call. And they're expecting a phone call. So the first thing I would say is give them a ring, and then just say who you are, and then just ask, is it convenient for them to speak? Because it may be they're at work, or it may be that they're in a social situation where they don't want to acknowledge that they're having therapy. The other thing I'd say on that is make sure that when you get your handover notes from the referrer, if there's any particular times that the client said it's all right to phone. So if they say phone between 10 and 11, phone between 10 and 11. Don't phone at 9 o'clock or 12 o'clock, because that space may be when they're on their own and they can talk about what's going on. The other thing I would say is just explain who you are. You know, I'm a student counsellor, and that I've heard you wanted to come and have some counselling, and that you're going to offer an appointment. And what I would say is try not, this is really important, try not to let the client speak too much about their difficulties, because what can happen, and it might sound a bit mean, is that there's a term called leakage, which is where clients are just so full of the story, they just want to get it out and tell someone it's urgent, they need to speak about it, it's pressing. And what can happen is that they try and tell you on the phone, and you can't really start a therapeutic dialogue on the phone. So if that happens, if the client starts to tell you what's going on, you know, let them speak a little bit, and then just say, okay, I hear what you're saying. maybe we can talk about that when we meet, and I look forward to meeting you.
Nice, really great advice. And as you're giving this informed advice, Rory, I'm just thinking this is not going to suit everybody, and it's about your agency that you're working in and whether you do have that contact with clients. I know in some agencies you don't hold that contact. The agency may make that appointment, and there's no need for you to make that phone call. But even so, even if it is not that you may be speaking to them on the phone that first time, it may be that you're meeting them from the waiting room for the first time and walking them to the room, so that the underlying philosophy of how we act and how we have that first contact with our clients is so important. To be open, warm, accepting, our face, I guess, not to be smiling, but not to look too stern, and just be aware of where we are in our space as we're meeting that person. And I like what you were saying there, Rory, about the telephone conversation. It is not therapy. And I'm in private practice, and I get a number of people calling me to arrange appointments, and very often they will launch into bringing material. And it is not therapy on the phone, because you do not have a contracted working agreement, and it's only counselling when it is in a fixed time, at a fixed place, and within a contract. So it is really important to do as Rory said, and to steer away from any material that may be brought, and you may close them down by saying, wow, it sounds like you're carrying a lot, so we'll look at that when you come in, but I just wanted to check if the dates are all right and if the time is all right. And it really is a transactional telephone conversation. You are arranging a transaction, a time, a place, a date, and that try to keep it as transactional as you can, while being warm and friendly, I guess.
Absolutely. Couple of must-dos here. One is try and use the agency's phone.
Yes. Tell us why, Rory. Why don't we use our own mobile, Rory?
Yes. Well, I'll come to that. Yeah. Try and use the agency's phone, and try and phone from a place that's quiet. What you don't want to do is sit in the waiting room with all the other clients and then phone the clients up, effectively outing them to all the people around, and arrange an appointment. Try and find somewhere quiet, confidential. Start as you mean to go on. The other thing is, do not, and this is something that Ken and myself used to talk about all the time when we talk together. Do not use your own phone, unless you can be sure you can block the number. And the reason for that is that once your number's out there, clients can phone you up, and some will. I know of somebody who was sitting down having a meal with their partner at a restaurant, and the phone rang, and it was a client. And what had happened was that they'd made contact, but they hadn't barred the number. They hadn't made the number private, and the client phoned them up. Can be really, really difficult. So, do not. And I know that some agencies give students mobile phones. We came across this where agencies said this is an agency mobile phone. What I would do is I would say to clients, this phone isn't monitored all the time. We just use it for outgoing calls, because you don't want a situation where a client is in desperate state. They phone you up and leave a message, and a week later you play it back, only to discover that something terrible may have happened. So, yeah, don't use your own mobile, and if you have to, then make sure that the number's blocked. Yeah. And I would say don't use your own mobile.
Yeah.
From the agency.
If there's any takeaway from today's podcast, it should be this. And I recognize how important this is. And I also recognize the other side of the argument, Rory, because we've had this discussion openly debated with maybe 13 to 15 students, where some of them were saying, but I really don't mind phoning the client with my phone. It's okay. I'm okay with making that first contact. It's not about that. When you're making an ethical decision, it's about always looking at what could possibly go wrong. And Rory's already mentioned one thing that could possibly go wrong, and that is that you get contacted at an inappropriate time that doesn't suit you, where you're not able to be there for the client outside of your contracted hours. But another incidence of what could go wrong, and we hope that these things don't, but they could, and they have in the past, and it's what informs these decisions, is what happens when you get a text at 3:00 in the morning from a client saying, I can't go anymore, I want to end it now. It's just not appropriate. You're not able to be there for that person outside of the counselling room. So having the phone, really it's just so important, isn't it?
Absolutely, Ken. And as I used to say to the students, you hope for the best and you plan for the worst. In any part of your practice, you look at the worst case scenario, and then you go forward from that to the best case scenario.
Yep.
But yeah, and it has happened. It has happened. It's not good. And also there's something around boundaries. If clients think they can contact you outside the session, then that's tricky. And it's a tricky one to manage in private practice. I'm very, very strict on how I interact on the phone. And it's very interesting. My wife said to me the other day, Ken.
What did she say?
I'll tell you what she said. She said, what are you doing over Christmas, Rory? So I said, I'm going to have my curry. And she said, no. She said, about your phone, are you going to put a message on your phone? Something, a different greeting? And I said, I never thought of that. I said, I think it possibly will. She said, because last year, people phoned you up in crisis over Christmas.
Yeah.
So this year I'm changing my business phone. And the message will be, I'm not available if you're having any difficulties. And I'm going to give a set of numbers, because it is people who literally are in desperate need. They look on the internet, they find myself, or they might find Ken or any other practitioner advertises, phone them up in crisis. And, I think it's really useful. In fact, our web pages on our internet pages both have the Samaritans phone number, don't they?
They do. They have emergency phone numbers.
Emergency phone numbers, yeah.
Definitely. It's an interesting topic, and I'm glad we started with it. And I think it fits with us going into the festive season as well. Some people may find themselves lonely. How do you manage that first contact, looking and managing your mobile number being out in the public domain? And we started by saying this was about that first contact with a client, and of course, after that phone call, you may meet them for that first session, which is another discussion entirely. But I did want to put in a link, and I'll put it into the show notes. I just did it now. I just made a note of that. And that is to an amazing blog post that we have on the Counselling Tutor website. And it's called First Counselling Session, Overview for Student Counsellors. And it talks about the first session, what you say to the client, how you welcome them, how you contract, the topping and tailing of the session. So I'll put that in as well, because I think that links in nicely to first contact with clients, because of course some of us, we don't get to speak to the clients before we see them for the first time in the therapy room. So moving away from that and moving smartly on to the German influence in today's episode, and that is of course the I and thou philosophy of dialogue, Rory.
It is. And before I go there, Ken, I want to share just a little story from practice this week, which really kind of highlighted to me how different professionals conduct dialogues with their clients. I work in private practice, and like a lot of practitioners, I hire rooms, and in the space between one client leaving and I'm waiting for the next client to attend, I got talking at the reception with a colleague who's a doctor, and we were talking about the polyvagal system and the limbic system and parts of the brain. And what was really, really interesting was that we both knew about how trauma affects the brain and the different parts of the brain, how it works. But here's the thing. In her practice, and don't get me wrong, she's a lovely, lovely, warm person, super, super person. In her practice, she'd explain the mechanics of it and how it's affected. In my practice, I might explain the mechanics of it, but then myself and the client would talk about the meanings, what it meant for them, and try and understand it. And it really does link into a lecture I'll be delivering, if you're listening to this tomorrow, which will be on the 17th of December, on the difference between the medical model and the social model of mental health. And one of the people who really kind of highlighted that was a philosopher called Martin Buber, who developed a philosophy called Ich und Du, I and thou. And he really is the father of modern our ideas of modern psychotherapeutic relationships. The fact that we don't see clients as a passive recipients of our knowledge, but we build meaningful dialogues. So that is Martin Buber, and I'm going to explain a little bit about his history and a little bit about how his philosophy is applied.
Oh, I like that. And I like how you link that to practice. Without any further ado, straight into theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees-Oakes.
It may surprise some of you to learn that one of the greatest contributors to the world of counselling and psychotherapy was not a psychotherapist, but a philosopher. Born in Vienna in 1878, Martin Buber became an important thinker in how humanity forms and sustains meaningful relationships. His work was a huge influence on Carl Rogers. Buber's area of philosophy became known as anthropological philosophy, the discipline of dealing with questions of metaphysics, phenomenology, and how those are applied in interpersonal relationships. The basic idea behind Buber's philosophy, which is the philosophy of dialogue, how we communicate with each other, was outlined in his groundbreaking book, Ich und Du, usually translated as I and Thou, and it was published in 1923. He hypothesized that human interactions fall into two basic dialogues. The I-it relationship is one between one human and another, where one is the passive recipient of the other's influence and control. The I-thou relationship is a human-to-human dialogue where both parties communicate equally with mutual understanding. An example of the I-it relationship is that of a traditional medical model doctor-patient relationship, where the patient is the recipient of diagnosis as a means to cure or a reduction of symptoms. An example of the I-thou relationship is the basis of how counsellors and psychotherapists build meaningful connections with clients on a human-to-human basis. The goal, to help clients be the authors of their own lives.
Thank you, as always, Rory. That's so interesting. And as you said, as you were going into this, there is a lecture in the Counselling Study resource that is going to go more in depth into that topic. And of course, if you enjoyed what you heard and you want to get Rory's super duper handout, which is great for when you're writing assignments that you can refer to, it's kind of that information pricey down with all the important parts. You can do that by going to counsellingtutor.com. That is our mother website. Click on the podcasts tab. It'll take you to all of our podcasts. Go to episode number 62. Right there in the page is all the show notes, all the links from today. That link to the first counselling session overview is there as well, but there is also the link to download Rory's handout from the page. However, if you are a member of the Counselling Study resource, then you can get the download. It's already been added to your Handouts Vault. And of course, if you're a Handouts Vault member, then you can just log into your Handouts Vault, and that is there for you whenever you choose to get it. That handout that Rory has just added. And if you're thinking, what is the Counselling Study resource and what is the Handouts Vault? Well, stick around to the end of today's episode because we do explain what that is and how you can join up to that. But moving away from theory, swiftly on, and we have a great topic here, and this is prejudice. It's a topic I love because prejudice, the meaning of prejudice for me is prejudging, prejudice. That's kind of how it sounds, prejudice, and how we can challenge our own prejudice, which is sometimes, I guess, invisible in the counselling room. But it comes from a Facebook comment that you're going to share with us, Rory.
It is. We thank Anita Ginge, and she writes, "Hi everyone, I wonder if anyone can help me. I'm trying to get my criteria on prejudice. I recently covered it in my learning review, but my tutor said I hadn't challenged it enough. Could anyone give me any tips on how to challenge personal prejudice, please? I'm really struggling as I found it quite hard to find something I'm prejudiced about in the first place. Thank you."
Oh, yes.
Well, Anita, yeah, it's an interesting one, and I'm going to share, as I'm apt to do, a little story from my teaching experience where I was teaching a group of level 2 students, and I had one person in the room. We talked about unconditional positive regard, the idea of Rogers and prizing the clients and not judging, and this particular learner said, "I don't judge anybody," and I'm open to everybody, and and I kind of guessed. As a teacher, that if I offered something, that he might fall for the bait. So I said, it was in 2008 when the banking crisis here in the UK was at its height, and I said, well, what happens if you had a merchant banker who came to you and said, well, the reason I'm upset is my bonus has been cut, and I can't afford my new Porsche, and I feel that I'm not seen in the same light as my peers. Now, it might seem on the face of it quite a kind of, a kind of flaky thing to present, but I've known people who've been very wealthy and their wealth has dropped considerably, and their friendships have been impacted by that because they're not in the same kind of very rich club, if you like. And this person who sat in front of me had previously said to all the group, "Oh, no, I'm not prejudiced." Then went on a 15-minute rant about how he hated bankers.
Yeah.
And he stopped. I said, "So tell me a little bit about you're not prejudiced then."
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It is. And it just occurs to me, the whole point of prejudice is that it is invisible. That there are the true prejudice is the one that we do not see, and that we're acting out of a set of beliefs that we hold as truths in a way that we think matches those truths, but it is marginalizing or downplaying someone else. And that is a prejudice in its truest form. It's usually sometimes seen by others in us, unless we share a space with other people that share the same prejudice. And I remember lecturing on this. And one of the things that I remember putting in the lecture, and I'll put it in here, Rory. Now, you see, Rory, you're not gonna take the bait, you see. But maybe if you're listening to this, you may. And the bait is as such. If we were having a conversation and you asked me a question and I nodded my head up and down, nodding my head, would that indicate that I agree with you or that I disagree with you? Come on, Rory. You're going to be too clever. So I'm not even going to wait for Rory's reply. Without us thinking about it, and without us thinking that is a loaded question that may be a trick where we need to think, we would consider if somebody was nodding their head up and down generally as they approve or they agree. However, if you look at, there are a few exceptions. There are some countries where nodding actually means no. Greece, Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, Egypt, Bulgaria, Albania, and Sicily, a single nod of the head up and down, not from side to side, indicates no. And that's a truth we have, that if somebody nods their head, they mean yes, but they don't. And it's only a truth that we hold. So it's about understanding where we come from, I think, examining self-concept to be able to spot prejudice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just wondering if there's anybody listening in those places, Ken, just as a challenge, who's saying, "I shake my head when I say no."
Yeah, and there you go. You see, I'm taking this from Wikipedia, which must be true, and it's the nod gesture on Wikipedia. And there you go. I'm forming my own truth right here, and that's the nature of it. This is really, really tricky, and I guess it's about us being open to examine our self-concept and who we are and what we believe and what we know as truth, and examine that and say, is this really true? It is an interesting topic. And when we hear of prejudice, usually people think of, people who are racially prejudiced or homophobic or all the kind of sexist, racist. But actually, prejudice it can be very, very subtle. I remember going for a job interview, and the chap saying to me at the place, "Yes, and you might have to work in Gorton." He said, for those of you who don't know where Gorton is, it's in a suburb of Manchester, which has its challenges. And he said, "You might have to work in Gorton." He said, "Oh, it's a terrible place. It's full of criminals, lots of guns and weapons and drugs." And he said, "How do you feel about working from Gorton?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, considering I was born there, I haven't got much of a problem." He went, You're not from Gorton, though, are you? I said, "Yeah, I was born in Gorton. Yeah, so I grew up in Gorton anyway." And he said, "Yeah," he said, "but you don't sound like someone from Gorton." And I said, "Well, who do I sound like?" And he went, "Well," he said, "you sound a bit educated." And this poor bloke was digging was just getting bigger and bigger. And eventually, because I wanted some work, so I just let him off the hook. But by the time he'd finished, he was about 100 feet down the hole. Yeah. Oh, it's so easy. And yeah. The truth is, I found myself in that same hole. I've done all my training, and personal development is really important to me. I look at myself, but I know I hold prejudice. I have to because I am human. And I know that some of the prejudice I hold is unseen to me. And there are certain giveaways. People like that. Groups like that. If they come from Gorton, then what do you expect? There's your prejudice when you are putting an individual and kind of assigning them to a group or a person type. There is a prejudice showing itself, and there's an area to look at and explore.
Yeah, and what I would say, Anita, is there's one that's really kind of polarised the country, and what I would say is have a think about your views on Brexit, because that is one that is really a huge debate. You could have people getting on just fine, and then someone mentions Brexit and which side of the side they're on, and before long you've got a very heated debate. So prejudice is very subtle, and we all have it. I have it. I know I have it, and it's one of those things that when it comes along and you're challenged on it, isn't to sort of say, well, this is my opinion, and it's to say, okay, it relates back to Martin Buber. See what I did there, Ken? It relates
Brilliant.
back to Martin Buber about saying, what's your perception of it?
Like it. What a great episode.
I think so.
Indeed it is. That kind of brings us to the end of episode 62. We opened up by looking at that first contact by phone, or when we first meet the client that we may be counselling. Theory with Rory, really interesting. I and thou. And of course, closing, looking at prejudice. That slippery, it's like a bar of soap, prejudice. It's kind of, you may have it in your hand for a second and then it's gone, and where is it? You don't see it. But it's about that self-exploration, I guess, as is so much in counselling and psychotherapy. What a great episode. Been great to be here.
Yeah, it has. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
If you enjoy the topics and handouts here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast, then you will love the Counselling Study Resource. CSR was built by myself, Ken, and Rory Lees-Oakes to give you the support you need during your counselling studies. So get access to the world's most comprehensive collection of resources aimed at supporting you in your journey to become a counsellor. Take the stress out of your studies by visiting counsellingtutor.com/CSR. That's counsellingtutor.com/CSR.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.